She was young, full of dreams, and just hours away from starting another ordinary day. But instead, Jessica Kaylor was stalked from a Walmart parking lot, brutally assaulted, and left to die in one of the strangest and most heartbreaking cases ever recorded. For hours, she was still alive, dazed, disoriented, fighting against a fate no one could save her from. This isn't just another crime story. This is a case so haunting, devastating, and unforgettable that it will leave you shaken long after the video ends. Jessica Lynn Kaylor was born on May 8, 1982, in Austin, Texas. She grew up there with her parents and two brothers before the family later settled in the small town of Pflugerville. Jessica's warmth and easygoing nature made her instantly likable, and she had a natural gift for making friends. But beneath her friendly personality was a deep determination. Even in high school, she already knew her path. She wanted to become a teacher. To chase that dream, Jessica enrolled at Texas State University, earning a bachelor's degree in science before pushing forward toward a master's. At the same time, she took a teaching assistant position at an elementary school and picked up shifts at a grocery store to help cover her mounting bills and student loans. Life was hectic, but Jessica never let the pressure dim her optimism. She believed her sacrifices would be worth it, and she was determined to see it through. By September 2009, Jessica was 27 years old, still balancing her studies with two jobs. She remained hopeful that soon she would land a permanent teaching position and finally dedicate herself to the career she'd always envisioned. On September 7th, she had the day off. She spent it surrounded by friends and her cousin, Melanie. They lounged at the pool, went out for dinner, and later played pool at a bar. As the night wound down, Jessica, always the responsible one, took on the role of designated driver, making sure everyone got home safely. Melanie was the last drop-off. It was close to 1:30 a.m. when they pulled up. Melanie offered her cousin a place to crash, but Jessica declined. She had an early shift at the grocery store and needed to stop at a 24-hour shop to grab food for her dogs. They said goodnight, and Jessica drove away. By sunrise, something was wrong. Melanie received a call from one of Jessica's co-workers, concerned that Jessica hadn't shown up for her shift. That was completely out of character. Jessica had never skipped work without a reason, and as store manager, she carried even more responsibility. Alarmed, Melanie began calling friends. No one had seen or heard from Jessica. Finally, she reached out to Jessica's brother, John. The two shared an apartment, but he hadn't seen her either. John, a police officer, explained that he'd left for his shift at 5:30 a.m. without checking her room. Still, the news worried him enough to rush home. The moment he walked in, his concern deepened. Jessica's bed hadn't been slept in, and her dogs were restless, acting as if they hadn't been fed. John knew instantly something was very wrong. He contacted his fellow officers, requesting they trace Jessica's cell phone. The signal led them to a restaurant not far from her apartment. Melanie and her boyfriend drove straight there. In the parking lot, they quickly spotted Jessica's car, but what they found inside was horrifying. Jessica was slumped in the driver's seat, motionless. The car was stifling hot, her skin marked with severe sunburns. Melanie's boyfriend immediately called for help. Police and paramedics rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Jessica was already gone. Her body was taken for examination, but one fact was undeniable. The circumstances suggested she hadn't simply died in her sleep. It looked very much like she had been attacked. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. Investigators began by examining Jessica's car, and almost immediately, something stood out. The driver's seat had been pushed unusually far back, suggesting someone other than Jessica had been behind the wheel. Given the injuries already visible on her body, detectives suspected the attack might have taken place right there inside the vehicle. Her keys, wallet, and credit cards were gone. In the back seat sat a bag of dog food, the errand she had planned to run after dropping off her cousin. To police, that was a clear sign she had been there since the night before. From there, detectives moved into the nearby restaurant where the car had been discovered. What they learned inside changed everything. One of the employees told them that when she arrived for her shift early that morning, she had noticed Jessica's car in the lot, and Jessica was still alive. The employee described a disturbing scene. Jessica was sitting naked inside her car, acting strangely, as if she were intoxicated or disoriented. At first, the worker brushed it off, heading inside to start her day. But when she returned outside later, Jessica was sitting on the ground next to the car. She had put her clothes back on, but still seemed unsettled, absent-mindedly running her hands through her hair. A third time, the woman saw her again, back in the driver's seat, talking to herself and making odd hand gestures. It wasn't just one account. Several other witnesses came forward saying they too had seen Jessica alive that morning. Yet despite her bizarre behavior, not a single person thought to intervene or call for help. Detectives turned back to Melanie, asking if Jessica might have been drinking or using drugs that night. But her cousin was adamant. Jessica was completely sober. She had been the designated driver, responsible for getting everyone home safely, and had an early shift the next morning. As for drugs, Melanie said that wasn't even a possibility. Jessica didn't use them. Still, the evidence was mounting that something far more sinister had happened. The medical examiner confirmed what investigators already feared. Jessica had been strangled. The marks on her body showed pressure from both hands and some kind of object, perhaps a rope or belt. Her body was also covered in bruises and scratches, and most devastating of all, she had been sexually assaulted. Experts suggested that the violent trauma may have caused a brain injury, one that left her disoriented and confused. Combined with the extreme heat inside the car, her condition would have worsened rapidly. That could explain why she behaved so strangely, why she never sought help, and why she seemed unaware of the danger she was in. Ultimately, she succumbed to her injuries. Toxicology results later confirmed Melanie's account. There were no drugs or alcohol in Jessica's system, which meant something else became painfully clear. If just one of those witnesses had called for help, Jessica might still be alive. Instead, the chance to save her was lost, and investigators were left with a far heavier task: finding out who had done this to her. Detectives turned their attention to surveillance footage, hoping cameras might reveal what had happened to Jessica. Unfortunately, there were none near the restaurant parking lot where her body was discovered, but there was another angle to pursue. Since Jessica had stopped to buy dog food that night, investigators realized she must have gone to the 24-hour Walmart directly across the street. When police obtained the store's security footage, there she was, Jessica, pulling into the lot and walking inside alone. She looked perfectly fine, calm, composed, no sign of distress. She went straight to the pet aisle, picked up a large bag of dog food, and headed to the register. Nothing seemed unusual until she walked back out. Just seconds later, a man followed her through the same doors. Rewinding the footage, detectives noticed that the man had pulled into the lot just minutes before Jessica. He parked far away, entered the building, but instead of shopping, he went straight into the restroom. Soon after, he re-emerged and walked directly behind Jessica, moving quickly, as if intent on catching up. The cameras then lost sight of him. Jessica's car happened to be parked behind a large tree, blocking the view. Still, the sequence was telling. The man walked toward the area where Jessica's car was parked, vanished from sight, and never reappeared. 2 minutes later, Jessica's car pulled out of the lot. Another camera captured it arriving at the restaurant parking lot, the same place where she would be found dead the next morning. Not long after, someone got out of Jessica's vehicle. The person walked across the lot, back toward Walmart's parking area, and climbed into the same vehicle the suspicious man had arrived in earlier. To detectives, it was now undeniable. This individual was directly tied to Jessica's death. But there was a problem. The footage was grainy. Neither the man's face nor the details of his vehicle could be made out clearly. Investigators pressed on. Jessica's wallet and credit cards had been taken, so they checked her accounts for recent transactions. There, they found a lead. One of her cards had been used at a gas station just 20 minutes after her car was abandoned. When detectives reviewed the gas station's cameras, they spotted a red pickup truck. Inside was the same man from the Walmart footage. Security video from inside the store clinched it. He used Jessica's credit card at the register. Now detectives had proof. This man wasn't just suspicious. He was in possession of Jessica's stolen property. Police released the images to the media, showing both the suspect and his red truck, urging the public to come forward with information. For days, no solid tips came in. Then the break they were waiting for arrived. A woman named Leslie called the police. She said the man in the footage looked exactly like her fiancé's best friend, 29-year-old Crispin Harrell. Leslie explained that Crispin had promised to stop by that evening to pay back money he owed her fiancé, but he never showed. Later, when she saw the news reports about Jessica's murder, she was stunned. The man in the surveillance video was unmistakably him. It was hard for Leslie to accept that someone she knew might be tied to such a horrific crime. But deep down, she knew what she had to do. She called the police and told them everything. As detectives dug into Crispin Harrell's background, a telling detail emerged. Just weeks before Jessica's murder, he had been pulled over by a patrol officer for driving with an expired license. Investigators reviewed the officer's body camera footage, and there was no mistaking it. Crispin looked exactly like their suspect. Even more damning, he was wearing the very same baseball cap seen in the Walmart surveillance video. 5 days after Jessica's death, police showed up at his home. Parked outside was his red pickup truck, identical in model to the one caught on camera. But something was different. The chrome details visible in the surveillance footage had been painted over in black, a hasty attempt to disguise the vehicle. When detectives knocked on his door, Crispin wasted no time with denial. To their surprise, he admitted he had been with Jessica that night. His story, however, raised more questions than it answered. According to him, they had met through an adult website and arranged a casual hookup. He claimed she picked him up in the Walmart parking lot, drove them to a nearby park where they had consensual sex, and then brought him back to Walmart. Before parting ways, he said, they sat in her car talking. He told her he was struggling financially, and Jessica, out of kindness, supposedly handed him her credit card so he could buy gas. Then, he said, they went their separate ways. Crispin explained that when he later saw Jessica's murder on the news, he panicked. Fearing he would be accused, he said he threw away her credit card and quickly repainted parts of his truck. Though delivered with confidence, detectives immediately recognized his version as a fabrication. The Walmart surveillance footage told a very different story. Crispin never approached Jessica until after she had returned to her car. He was clearly seen walking back alone to his own truck. At no point did Jessica's car leave the lot, and no one else was observed near it until the following morning, when her vehicle turned up at the restaurant. To dismantle his claims further, investigators seized his phone, computer, and Jessica's devices. As expected, there was no evidence of any contact between them. No calls, no messages, no online interactions. In fact, forensic analysis confirmed Jessica had never even visited the adult website Crispin claimed they had used to arrange their meeting. But detectives did uncover something incriminating on Crispin's computer. Within hours of police discovering Jessica's body, he had already searched for and read multiple articles about her murder. Jessica's loved ones dismissed his story outright. Friends and family described her as responsible and grounded. Certainly not someone who would seek out a late-night hookup with a stranger in a parking lot. She had already told her cousin she planned to go home, feed her dogs, and get some rest before her morning shift. The idea that she would abandon that plan for a reckless encounter didn't fit with who she was. To investigators, it was clear. Crispin wasn't just lying. He was scrambling to deflect blame. But with the evidence stacking higher by the day, there was no way out. His story had collapsed under the weight of the facts. By analyzing the surveillance footage, detectives pieced together what they believed had truly happened that night. Crispin likely spotted Jessica inside Walmart and singled her out as a target. He followed her to her car, forced his way inside, and used threats to silence her. From there, investigators believed he made her drive to a nearby park, where he sexually assaulted her, before returning to the parking lot near Walmart, close to his own truck. Before leaving, he strangled her and stole her wallet and credit cards. When confronted with this version of events, Crispin shut down. He stopped answering questions and demanded a lawyer. On paper, detectives had a strong case, but legally, it was far from airtight. The complication was as unusual as it was troubling. Jessica had survived for hours after the attack. The official cause of death was strangulation, but experts faced a critical problem. Medical science had never documented a case like Jessica's before. Someone strangled, surviving for hours, walking, talking, and then ultimately dying as a direct result. Without precedent, prosecutors feared a jury might struggle to connect the attack with her death beyond reasonable doubt. The evidence strongly pointed to Crispin, but the uncertainty surrounding her survival window threatened to unravel the case in court. The only thing that could have sealed his fate was a confession, but Crispin refused to admit anything. Investigators searched Jessica's car again, desperate for a breakthrough, but came up empty. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing directly tying him to the crime. Prosecutors turned to a fallback option. Since Crispin had already admitted to discarding Jessica's credit card and repainting his truck, they charged him with evidence tampering. At least that way, he could be held accountable for something, while investigators continued building a murder case. In May 2010, Crispin pleaded guilty and received a 10-year prison sentence for tampering with evidence. But for detectives, the fight was far from over. They were determined to deliver full justice for Jessica, and that meant proving scientifically that Crispin's attack caused her death. For years, progress stalled. Then, in 2013, a breakthrough surfaced. Investigators discovered a medical journal article describing rare cases where strangulation did not immediately kill the victim. Instead, it triggered what experts called delayed death syndrome. a condition where brain damage left victims disoriented, confused, and unable to seek help until their bodies finally gave out. The description matched Jessica's final hours almost exactly. Witnesses had seen her behaving strangely, muttering, running her hands through her hair. Classic signs of the disorientation caused by such trauma. The article also echoed the original medical examiner's suspicion that Jessica had suffered a brain injury from the strangulation, one that impaired her awareness until it was too late. With this new science in hand, detectives contacted the author of the study. For the first time, they had the expert testimony needed to explain Jessica's survival period and prove that her death was still the direct result of Crispin's attack. Armed with cutting-edge medical evidence, they were finally ready to bring a full murder case against him. In May 2014, after years of painstaking work, Crispin Harle was finally arrested and charged with murder. Yet even as the evidence mounted, he clung to his claim of innocence. At trial, his defense attorney zeroed in on one glaring issue. There was no DNA evidence tying Crispin directly to the crime. Prosecutors argued that Jessica had fought fiercely for her life, likely scratching her attacker and leaving behind genetic material under her fingernails. But forensic experts for the state explained why no such evidence could be recovered. Jessica's body had remained in her car for hours under punishing heat. At those temperatures, DNA rapidly degrades. By the time investigators examined her, any trace under her nails would have been destroyed. The state's case leaned heavily on the mountain of surveillance footage. Every frame pointed toward Crispin's guilt. But just as prosecutors seemed to be gaining ground, the defense found its opening. Crispin's attorney challenged the timestamps on the footage. When investigators first obtained the security video, it had no timestamps. To establish a timeline, prosecutors later added them using specialized software. The defense argued this was a serious breach, claiming the altered footage had never been provided for review. The judge agreed. On that technicality, the trial collapsed. A mistrial was declared, and once again, Crispin slipped through the system's grasp. Still, he remained behind bars, serving out his 10-year sentence for evidence tampering. Meanwhile, prosecutors regrouped, determined not to let him walk free forever. Over the next several years, Crispin's legal team fought aggressively to block a retrial, arguing that another prosecution would violate his rights. But higher courts sided with the state, paving the way for a second trial. In 2018, the case returned to court. This time, prosecutors left nothing to chance. Every piece of evidence, every timeline, every expert testimony was meticulously prepared. The jury heard about Crispin's suspicious behavior, the surveillance trail, and the scientific explanation of delayed death syndrome that accounted for Jessica's final hours. Step by step, the prosecution dismantled his defense. This time, it worked. The jury found Crispin guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors had deliberately chosen not to pursue the death penalty, fearing the medical complexities of the case might give even one juror reason to hesitate. In a capital case, they couldn't afford that risk. Crispin appealed in the years that followed, but his request was denied. Today, he remains in prison, with virtually no chance of release. For Jessica's family, the verdict was bittersweet. They expressed gratitude to investigators and prosecutors who never gave up, even as the case dragged on for nearly a decade. Yet they admitted that no conviction, no sentence, could truly heal their grief. Justice had been served, but closure would never come. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.